Dragon factions and the 21 seats. How the dragon factions intersect with the 21 seats. Yes, the dragon families have long held internal divisions, often expressed through color designations that signal lineage, function, and sphere of influence. While the meanings have shifted over time and between regions, the core associations have remained. Red dragons, traditionally linked to guardianship of bloodlines and enforcement of agreements. They operate in both visible and hidden spheres, often acting as the protectors or enforcers for the family's greater will. White dragons, associated with spiritual or philosophical authority, sometimes tasked with preserving esoteric knowledge or acting as mediators between factions. In modern times, some claim independence from the family's more controlling aspects, but ties remain. Black dragons hold the role of financial and resource control, including hidden wealth systems, banking influence, and the movement of assets. They often manage the infrastructure that keeps the wider structure functioning. Gold dragons, historically tied to the treasury and to the safeguarding or strategic release of precious resources, especially gold itself. They also act as record keepers of ancient agreements. Blue dragons, traditionally associated with diplomacy, foreign relations, and coordination between regions or other elite networks. They are skilled in subtle influence and negotiation. Green dragons, connected to the control of land, agriculture, and environmental resources, including strategic decisions about territory. These colors do not always represent a single unified chain of command. Rather, they are threads in a tapestry of shifting alliances, rivalries, and power sharing within the broader dragon family network. Some colors have splinter groups that work against the others, while still using the same symbolic identity. How the dragon factions intersect with the seats. Several dragon factions intersect with the 21 seats through historical alliances, bloodline intermarriages, and shared control of key domains. The connection is not always direct membership. It is often influenced through proxy seats, hidden agreements, or shared operational goals. Red dragons and the seats, often embedded as enforcers for particular seats, especially those tasked with maintaining security, secrecy, or military power. In some periods, red dragon operatives were the physical hand of certain thrones. White dragons and the seats, historically aligned with seats holding spiritual or religious authority. Their philosophical and ritual knowledge allowed them to reinforce the symbolic legitimacy of the thrones. Black dragons and the seats, deeply entwined with seats controlling finance, trade routes, and banking systems. Some black dragon networks act almost as the financial shadow branch of those seats. Gold dragons and the seats, tied closely to resource-based seats. They serve as both stewards and gatekeepers of wealth that underpins the seat's power. Some gold holdings are still bound by ancient agreements signed by both thrones and dragon elders. Blue dragons and the seats act as diplomatic intermediaries, allowing certain seats to maintain influence across borders without direct exposure. They often negotiate on behalf of multiple thrones at once. Green dragons and the seats, linked to seats controlling agricultural resources, land, and environmental policy. Their reach can determine which regions thrive or starve, shaping political outcomes indirectly. At different points in history, the dragon families have acted as a parallel power system to the 21 seats, sometimes cooperating, sometimes competing, sometimes infiltrating. In modern times, certain dragon factions have merged so deeply with specific seats that the distinction between dragon and seat is more symbolic than structural. Dragon colors are most aligned with which specific seats? Here is how the keepers describe the strongest alignments between dragon factions and specific seats within the 21-seat framework. This is not a fixed map. Some alliances shift, some weaken, some are hidden, but these are the most consistent patterns over the long arc of history. 1. Red dragons. Most aligned with seats overseeing military command, covert enforcement, and security infrastructure, historically tied to two primary seats, one rooted in the Eurasian heartland and one in the Mediterranean nexus. Function, physical enforcement of oaths, suppression of dissent, and securing strategic assets. 2. White dragons, linked to seats with religious authority, ritual law, and philosophical legitimacy. Strongest historic tie to the seat once centered in the Himalayan sphere, and to a secondary seat that influenced Middle Eastern sacred structures. Function, maintaining the ideological or spiritual narrative that justifies the rule of the thrones. 3. Black dragons, embedded within seats controlling global finance, banking systems, and hidden asset flows. Most closely tied to the seat historically based in the European financial capitals, and one older seat that oversaw east-west trade routes. Function, sustaining the economic foundation for the throne's control, enabling both open and covert funding of projects. 4. Gold dragons, interlinked with seats that hold treasury power and resource monopolies, especially precious metals. Most aligned with the seat in Southeast Asia, ancient treasury hub, and a seat tied to mineral-rich African territories. Function, acting as custodians of deep reserves, deciding when to release or conceal wealth to influence geopolitical shifts. 5. Blue dragons, interwoven with seats operating in diplomatic networks and international agreements. Historically strong ties to the seat in the British Isles and a seat in the Mediterranean crossroads. Function, serving as negotiators and intermediaries to shape alliances without exposing the thrones directly. 6. Green dragons, connected to seats with land and agricultural control, and later environmental resource management. Strongest historic alignment, with a seat tied to Fertile Crescent territories, and another linked to South American agricultural wealth. Function, controlling food security, territorial access, and ecological policy as levers of influence. When Dragon faction became strongly bonded to its respective seats. Here is the keeper-aligned timeline of when each dragon color became strongly bonded to its respective seats within the 21-seat framework. The years are expressed in human time estimates, but the events span eras far older than recorded history. Approx. 12,000 to 8,000 years ago, shortly after the post-cataclysm restructuring of seats. Gold dragons, seats of resource and treasury control integration date, about 11,500 years ago. Reason, after the great redistribution of surviving wealth post-cataclysm, gold dragon custodians were tasked with guarding metals, and treasures moved to hidden vaults across Asia, Africa, and island chains. Key seats, Southeast Asia Treasury Hub, mineral seat in Africa. Green dragons, seats of agricultural and land control, integration date about 10,800 years ago. Reason, stabilization of food supply in restructured power regions. Green dragons took responsibility for agricultural monopolies, making them indispensable to two seats. Marduk consolidation era. Approx. 7,000 to 5,000 years ago, during Marduk's ascent and peak rule. Red dragons, military and enforcement seats. Integration date, about 6,900 years ago. Reason. Marduk brought red dragons into direct service to enforce the new order, using them as his elite force for suppression, intimidation, and loyalty enforcement. Key seats, Eurasian military seat, Mediterranean military naval seat, white dragons, religious and ideological seats. Integration date, about 6,500 years ago. Reason, Marduk saw the necessity of spiritual authority to legitimize the thrones. White dragons were placed as advisors and ritual custodians to the key spiritual seats. Late Shadow Integration Era. Approx. 2,500 to 1,200 years ago, as fractures in direct Marduk control began, but influence remained high. Black dragons, financial and trade seats. Integration date about 2,300 years ago. Reason, the emergence of global trade networks between East and West gave black dragons an opportunity to manage banking flows and act as shadow treasurers for multiple seats. Blue dragons, diplomatic and alliance seats. Integration date, about 1,800 years ago. Reason, as the world's empires grew interconnected, blue dragons became essential in managing diplomacy between seats and avoiding open conflict between them. 200,000 years ago, golden dragons, royal stewards of cosmic law and wealth custodians. 150,000 years ago, green dragons, stewards of Earth's natural grids and ley lines. 120,000 years ago, red dragons, warrior protectors of dynastic bloodlines. 100,000 years ago, white dragons, keepers of spiritual purity and celestial ancestry. 75,000 years ago, black dragons, masters of secrecy, shadow dealings and influence. 50,000 years ago, blue dragons, navigators of diplomacy, maritime control and trade routes.